in touch with the emotional side of writing, where I feel what I see, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I also like listening to music, and I like just making stuff, like
Yeah.
any old stuff I can make with leftover things. I love gardening, so I try to make old benches and things like that.
Who was the storyteller in your family when you were growing up?
I can remember I had an Uncle Eric in Grenada, and whenever we went to visit my grandfather, he'd always come over and he'd always be telling stories to us. A lot of them only had some characters. What I remember most was the older people always saying, "Is a Nancy story, is a Nancy story." But my mom told me stories. My dad used to tell me stories from Grenada. And I do remember my grandmother from Dominica telling us stories as well.
How many books have you written?
I've written two full-length novels, um, but more recently I've been doing shorter pieces. So two books, but lots of short stories and poems.
Uh, which is your favorite and why?
Um, I think my favorite, well, I love Journey as the Wire Bend Upriver Where the Story End because I managed to cram almost all of the Caribbean folklore characters into it. And when I tell those stories, because the novel is made up of little stories, as you know, people tell stories in the novel. So when I share those stories with children and other people, they enjoy them. So I think I would have to say that's my favorite still, even though I've written other things that I like that you could find on my website.
Uh, do you have any suggestions to help me and other young people like me to become a better writer? If so, what are they?
Yes, I was thinking that advice is a good thing. I think the most important thing is to always keep learning, and to experience as much as you can. If there's something that you would like to do, go out and do it. Meet people, talk to people, climb a mountain if you want to climb a mountain, sail on a ship across the sea if you want to, because it's those experiences that will influence all the things you'll be able to describe when you come to write your stories. So go out and meet people and notice everything and notice how you feel about everything. So if you keep a little journal or a little diary where you just write down all the things and how you felt about them and try to remember what they look like, that would help you a lot. But I think read, 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 and just write. It doesn't matter if you think it's good or it's not good, just write. Write poems, write a paragraph, write a story. It doesn't matter how long it is, just make sure that it has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Thank you for answering my questions, and I'll remember to keep a journal to become a better writer. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, put your hands together for the lovely Mrs. Leva Levi.
Thank you, Amma. Thank you so much.
The,
I think,
And we
the,
are going to put our hands together for our own Ama Small. So
yes.
you
Nice one, Amma. Thank you. Thank you for interviewing me.
Hold on, I'm not
excellent.
finished yet.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry.
The author of Journey as the Wild Bent Upriver where the story ends. P.S. And the Gang story in chapter 13 is my favorite.
Uh,
You can get a copy of Journey as the Wild Bent Upriver where the story ends on river/river
Hi.
hyphen
River Dot.
river-stories.com. Only for £10.
Thank
Please
you.
support our offers. Thank you.
Thank you, Amma.
Yeah.
Thank you. We could almost end it right there because the next generation is on its way.
Yes,
Congratulations to you, Amma. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Lisa.
thank you.
The next author we are going to visit is Edith and Nancy Ferguson Jacob. Um, she has celebrated 45 years as a graduate teacher and specialist lecturer in Caribbean history, culture, and African art history. She has done a lot of research on the intangible heritage and origins of the Barbados landship. She's the author of the book Full Steam Ahead, Locating the Barbados Landship, which ensures that the people of Barbados have a better understanding of their African origins in Ghana and the role of the Asafo institution. Dr. Jacobs has spent 7 years in Grenada, where she was employed as a senior lecturer and wrote several courses on aspects of Caribbean cultures for the T.A. Mary Shaw Community College. She then became chair of the Department of Humanities, Art and Culture until she returned to Barbados in 2012. Right now, she's an independent scholar who does lectures and curates on African art and culture and aspects of the African heritage in the Caribbean. She says that she's semi-retired. I was supposed to allow Lisa to read an excerpt of her book. So I've made a little bit of a mistake. So Dr. Jacobs, I would like to rewind and let Lisa read an excerpt from her book. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Okay. I'm just going to read something quick because a little piece from the book that Amma makes me feel so good because she loves my book so much that I always feel like that's why you write. You know, especially when you write stories for children, you write so that they will love it. Because I remember reading books as a child and just loving them. So has a special place in my heart. But this is coming around to the end of the book where the children get they get gifts from Papa Bois. And it goes, this is chapter 18, so Amma will know this. The treasures of the forest, boomed Papa Bois, bending over the chest. The children watched him in awe and anticipation. He sank his arms into the dark recesses and pulled out something long and golden. It flashed in the faint light, and as he put it to his lips, a soft, fleeting melody climbed on the still air. Bigger leaned toward the breathy notes with a deep longing to touch the gleaming instrument. Also intrigued, Annabel sat forward. She eyed every detail of the long flute, the mouthpiece, ringed with tiny diamonds that shimmered like glitter dust, the sparkling jewels that studded the golden length, the silver caps with tiny green stones in the centers that covered each air hole, and the fine engravings that decorated the wide bell. Papa Bois' long fingers flitted over the almost magical instrument, the piping sounds dancing and playing on the air. With a sweeping flourish, he brought the tune to an end, and the ringing notes faded gently. Annabel laughed, clapping her hands, and Bigger hummed the melody in agreement. Mm-hmm. Papa Bois nodded at him and held out the long golden horn. Is for you, he said, an instrument to melt hard hearts and raise low spirits high. Bigger's fingers closed over the cool metal. The songs of nature are stored in its bell. It was forged for me many years ago by a manfolk living at the edge of the forest, a master craftsman and my old friend. Bigger stroked the jewel stem and tapped the silver keys. He put the studded mouthpiece to his lips and blew. A dull, toneless note cried out, and Annabel laughed at him. touching the engraved pictures on the bell. Turning his glance away from the horn, Percy leaned forward to see what else was inside the large chest. But at his first glimpse of the deep sides, Papabois shifted his position, blocking his view. And for the manful girl child, who see Mama best, said Papabois. He put one hand into the open chest and took out a simple wooden box. Treasure, he said, turning to Annabel, and his dark gaze held hers. Annabel stared into the deep centers of his eyes, where the forest gleamed warm and rich, and with a small nod took the plain box. With two delicate fingers, she lifted the golden latch and raised the unadorned lid. Inside, pairs of colors sat on 3 levels. 12 colors in all: gold and red, green and brown, white and yellow, purple and black, silver and blue, gray and pink, each shade glowing with a faint, dusty fluorescence. Oh, Annabel breathed, the colors filling her with a feeling of excitement. They're beautiful. Percy peered into the paint box. Is there anything for me? He asked, unable to resist. As Bigger blew another discordant note and Annabel dipped her finger into the fine soft paint, Papabois looked at Percy. The man-child who did know the bois, he said, nodding, and who use it well. He smiled, reaching deep into the chest and lifting out a large book. For you, he said to Percy, and held the massive tome out with both hands. It had a mossy green cover and was as thick as a dictionary. The stories, said Percy. The book of stories, said Papabois. The book with the tales of the bush folk, to tell and to share, to add to and recreate. Percy took the book in both hands solemnly. He traced a faded embroidery that had been stitched into the surface of the cover, hardly able to make out the picture in the poor light. The colors were faded, but he could tell it was of a boy and a girl with a dog under a tree. On one of the distant hills stood another boy, waving at a dark yellow sun. Percy inhaled deeply, and the scent of bay leaves filled his nose. He hugged the book to his chest and nodded. Thank you, he said. Yes, thank you, sir, said Bigger. Thank you, Annabel added. And one day, when days are old, Papabois rumbled, you must bring them back to me again. The 3 children nodded eagerly, and Papabois stood up. But for now, he began, and the dog's sharp yelp broke into the stillness. That is your dog, is time. Dubs, Percy called. She warning us that we must move quickly, Papabois informed him, and picked up the softly glowing staff. With graceful ease, he tossed it to his other hand and moved around the row of stones. Bigger, Percy, and Annabel got up as one and followed him.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is Amma's recommendation. So we must all make sure that we get a copy of this book. That was Lisa Levy, and the book, as recommended by our own Amma, is Journey as the Wire Bend Upriver Where the Story Ends, and you can get it on river-stories.com.
Thank you.
So next, I introduced Dr. Jacobs, and then unceremoniously interrupted my thoughts. You see, it's Valentine's Day, so I have romantic thoughts on my mind. But I told you that she's semi-retired, and she spent a lot of time researching the landship, and she spent also about 7 days in Grenada as senior lecturer at the T.A. Mary Shaw Community College until she came back to Barbados. So I want to welcome the lovely Dr. Jacobs. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Happy Valentine's
Anytime.
Day. The first thing I want to recognize, though, and in our in our spirit of recognizing our ancestors and so on, and as related to your work, is that we want to pay homage to the late Lord High Admiral Captain Vernon Watson, who transitioned at the end of last month. And I'm sure that he spent a lot of time, I'm sure that he was a great inspiration to your work. So the first question I wanted to ask, as we remember him, is why did you decide to research the Barbados land ship?
Good question. I probably only now will be able to answer that because as a young person, I had just left school and I was at community college when I met Elombe Motley and El Verno del Congo, Vern Best. He was a drummer. And they were now more or less starting Yoruba House. And I had no problem in going. It wasn't too far from me. I could walk and come back home easily. And my parents had no problems with it. And so we were there and we started doing dance. And then it was decided, Elton had Baba Elombe, he had an interest in the landship as well. And so it was decided that we would go up to Highlands and St. Thomas on Friday nights, where we would learn the maneuvers, what everybody sees as the movements. And so we went for a couple of weeks, and we got to learn the movements. And then we did a choreography based on that, which I think at some point in time we did take it to Trinidad. I don't think anywhere else we were supposed to do that anyway. But at that time, I used to play the part of man overboard. That was quite a bit of being on the floor, and it was like a completely different. It was a completely different feeling, or exploring what man overboard really meant, and I only understood that most recently. Dealing with Admiral Watson, so I knew him from all that time, so I would have been about 18. And he died on the 9th of January, just after his 89th birthday was the 2nd of December. So it was really a while, and we knew that he wasn't going to be around for long, but we just wanted to make sure that we tried to get everything in place. And your question still again, why did I write about the landship? When I was doing my master's at the University of South Florida, in Tampa. And that one particular day that I was late because I had to go to bring up an older lady, now like myself, bring her up the stairs to the class. So I didn't know what had started. So I'm just listening, and I'm hearing them talking about this group of people who were very demonstrative, and they're doing this performance thing. And all I'm listening, I'm saying to myself, but this song like the landship. This sounds like the landship from my home. But to my disappointment, wasn't the landship. It's a group in Ghana called the Asafo. So it is then when I found out about the Asafo, I started to look at the similarities and the differences between the two. And that is why I started working on, I'm looking at where they came from, the origins. Well, there's still a lot of work to be done. I'm still not even completely sure, because somebody else will call and say, Are you sure it is from this place? Are you sure it's from Ghana? Because people in Trinidad asked me about the sailor man, that carnival costume, that outfit, if it would have come from Barbados. I don't know. I haven't had the time to research that one as yet, but I will try and get there.
So the work continues. In other words, you can.
Work is still continuing. Work is still
Awesome.
continuing.
Awesome. So can you tell us, we expect a reading from a little bit, an excerpt from everybody. So
Yes.
before you started to read, I wanted to ask you if you could, or if maybe that was coming out in the excerpt, but to make that connection for somebody who has absolutely no idea about the landship. It can be fair, it can be entertaining, but puzzling if you're not acquainted with the landship. So I wanted to ask you to make that link and to explain, or if that is going to come out in the excerpt that you read, then can you do that for us, please?
Well, the bit that I had chosen would have been to look at the comparisons of the Barbados landship and the Asafo.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So you would like me to go ahead and read now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. The Barbados landship sailed the high seas of Barbados from 1863 onwards. It is the oldest serving African Barbadian organization in existence today. In its heyday during the 1930s, there were 3 fleets of 60 ships with a membership of over 3,000 men and 800 women. Over the following years, there have been several periods of adjustment with the number of ships and membership fluctuating until at present there's only 1 ship remaining with about 24 members. After all this time, not much is known by the Barbadian public about the landship outside of its visual impact of uniforms, a lot of them in white, some with lilac, some with blue, some with black, decorated with colorful cords and animated performance with the accompaniment of the tuk band known as the engine. The phenomenon known as the Barbados landship is truly an example of an oxymoron of the English language, a combination of 2 contradictory terms, a marine activity on land. It is hoped to demonstrate that this institution carries within the body of its maneuvers the oldest African-based performance of the journey known as the Middle Passage. This traumatic experience of the enslaved West Africans who were brought to Barbados mainly during the 17th century created this reenactment to ensure we, their children, never forgot from whence we came. It is proposed to demonstrate the predominantly African provenance of the Barbados landship and trace the origins to the traditional maritime organization of the Fanti peoples from the Gold Coast region of Ghana, known as the Asafo. The general characteristics of the Asafo organization are quite similar to those of the Barbados landship in several areas. The development of companies or ships located within one domicile, the naming and identification of companies, the titles attached to the offices and uniforms within the companies, the collection of the monetary contributions accumulated by the membership linked to the responsibility for the funeral ceremonies of their members, and most importantly, the animated ceremonial processions and performances within the communities. Most of the information contained herein is based on ongoing research on the Asafo institution and corresponding links with the Barbados Landship Association. Drawing largely on the disciplines of African art history and Caribbean history, it discusses the artistic, social, and political traditions of the Akan people, which bind these two institutions. It has been a long process trying to identify the connections from the past, addressing the period of slavery to emancipation and into the present. It is hoped that these linkages offer some meaningfulness and identification for a people who have been separated for over 400 years. The evidence provided demonstrates the similarities in the framework of these institutions and their divergence after the impact of British colonization. That's where I will let that be a little bit of intrigue for those who would like to read.
Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Jacobs. Before you go, or not go, but I wanted to ask about the continuity. Are you satisfied that our landship is in good hands and it attracts younger and continued dedicated people, and that it's going to continue to be our thing from your research and experience? I see you shaking your head.
Hard one. It's a hard one. We do have young people who are making up the majority of the membership, but
Okay.
it is always in competition with, and this is ours. But I think a lot of, we have been, how shall I put it? We have been trained accepting other things, other people's vineyards have we kept, and we are still doing it. Or young people don't see the sense in belonging to the landship. They don't see anything in it because they haven't got a background. We don't learn these things at school. We don't learn anything. Some of those people don't even know what, has never heard the word Asafo. So they don't really see the real necessity to learn, to be a part of it, and to grow. I guess we now have to find some new ways to make it a place of interest, either that they can do it like brownies and guides, because I will tell you this, when the guides were started and so forth, I forgot his name right now, but he had gone to Ghana. Baden Powell, that's his name. Baden Powell had gone to Ghana and he had seen the Asafo functioning and came back to England and started then those scouts and guides and so forth. That is what it was based on. But no, nobody want to do the origin of it.
Mm-hmm. So it's
and those are some of the things in the book. You understand? So it's very difficult where you have all the internet and all the things that are modern and technological in comparison to what is the landship. People say, oh, it's only the dancing up, and as they would say, walking up to be said. But there's a lot more than that.
But I believe that the book is going to play a very important role in helping people claim, and feel as though it's ours, and hopefully continue it. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much for your excerpts. I know I will be getting a copy of the book once we are released from lockdown. So thank you very much, Dr. Jacobs, for your contribution and for coming with us today on Lockdown 246.
Thank you very much for having me as well. I really enjoy being with you all.
Thank
Yes,
you. We
thank
love
you.
having you as well.
Thank
All
you.
right. So the
Okay.
next, we are staying in Barbados, and we have Sherry Jones with us. Sherry Jones is an award-winning author from right here in BIM. Her debut novel, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House, has been critically acclaimed by several publications, including the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and the Washington Post, and is actually this month's pick for Good Morning America's book club. Her past publications include credits with Pank, The Feminist Wire, and Eclectica. She's also a past fellowship awardee of the Vermont Studio Center and a recipient of the Archie Markham Award and the AMP Prize from Sheffield Hallam University. She's as young as she looks, huh? Because she's my age. She has published a previous short story collection, The Burning Bush Women, published by People Tree Press. And she lives here. She lives and works in Barbados with her children. And in addition to her writing, she's a lawyer, and she enjoys indulging her passion for chocolate. And that is based on a bio that she submitted herself. So confession is good for the soul.
Yes.
Welcome, Sherry.
Hi, Ayana. Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
We have all been enjoying seeing the strides that your book has taken, has been making, particularly penetrating the difficult American market. So can you tell us, I know you were with us before and you were a big hit, but can you tell us what the inspiration was for this particular novel?
So How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House started like most of my other written works start. Essentially, I heard the voice of one of the characters, it was Lala, telling me bits of the story. So I was living and working in the UK at the time, and I was on the bus on my way home in the evening, and this character just started to talk to me, basically tell me parts of her story. And that really was the inspiration for the novel. It started out as a short story. I started writing as soon as I got home. I rewrote and I rewrote and I rewrote till the next morning. But it started as a short story, but eventually turned into a novel. So it started with a character in my head.
Wonderful. And it's set in Baxter's Beach.
Yes, so Baxter's Beach is a fictional beach. There's no actual Baxter's Beach in Barbados. There's Baxter's Road, there's Baxter's Village, but there's no Baxter's Beach that I am aware of. But yes, so it's set on a fictional beach in Barbados.
And I've seen some people online trying to figure out where and putting out possibilities where it could be and so on. So I know that you have to wheel out. I know that you said that you have an obligation after this, and I can imagine that there are many, but we wanted you to read us an excerpt and tell us why you chose that particular excerpt. Yes.
Okay. So I am going to read from my favorite chapter 25. Why would I choose this? Why is this my favorite part of the book? I think this is the chapter when the main character, Lala, asks herself a very important question. And I think by the end of the chapter, she has made some progress in terms of her internal development. And I think this is what helps to lead to her transformation by the end of the novel and to her escaping the circumstances that she finds herself in when we first meet her in the book. So this is my my favorite chapter. It was really difficult for me to write it in a lot of ways, but it was also a joy to write. Um, so I'll just read a little bit of it. So it's chapter 25, Lala, 5th January 1984. How do you learn to love a man? You first ask yourself this question when you are a new bride. These are the days when Aiden's robberies buy you clothing to replace the awful dresses Wilma made. He buys you neon yellow denim dresses and orange suede ankle boots with kitten heels and studded leather belts you can wear across your hips when you go with him to the dance hall, to hear Alpha 24, and watch bad boys bob and weave to their best approximations of the music of their ancestors. These are also the days when Aiden first demonstrates his ability to box these clothes off of you, to tear these dresses, and beat you with the heels of the very booties he first presented in a bow-topped box. How do you learn to love a man? On the night you first ask yourself this question, you braid your own hair in fat box braids piled high on top of your head, and you allow it to fall in heavy plaits down your back. You are wearing a little acid wash denim jumpsuit that strains across a thickening belly and ends in a miniskirt you keep tugging back down your thighs. You are wearing a pink undershirt you have slashed and refastened with safety pins, because this is the style. On this night, you're still filled with heady joy each time you glance at your left hand and see Chinky's handiwork, its tiny diamond casting rainbows across your eyes. You're still inebriated with the exaltation of being free to dress this way, in clothes Wilma would disapprove of, and bought for you by a husband, not just a boyfriend she despises. On this night, you have ironed Aiden's tracksuit and fretted over how to navigate the cuffs and collar so that they will sit perfectly on wrists you are only just learning to feel. And then you watch as your husband gets dressed, splashes himself in cologne, puts on the bright white sneakers you have spent the better part of an afternoon rubbing with white X. When the two of you arrive at the pasture on which Alpha 24 is hosting their New Year's dance, Aiden is swarmed by a bunch of his friends, women in fishnet jumpsuits and miniskirts and gold hoops that eclipse the movement of their jaws as they chew chiclet gum. Men who call Aiden big man and governor and touch their own bling-encrusted fist to his and nod. And in this group of laughing, drinking, dancing buddies stands Tone, quietly sipping a soft drink against the gaily branded side of a stall that vibrates in time to pass the duchy. How do you learn to love a man? You may think you learn by doing. So after you have pressed your husband's clothes and whitened his sneakers and walked with him to the dance in your kitten heel orange booties, you might tramp those suede booties through the damp grass to fetch him his drinks, his food, and his Fanta. And then you might stand in front of him, allow it to seem like you are in his care, with your eyes perpetually on his cup to see when he might be in need of a refill. You might think that the flutter in your stomach when you watch him, the beauty of his black skin and white smile, and a broad, high brow beneath a brown hat, is the love you're learning by doing all these things. It is the love you're meant to have, and it will cushion the bruises the better you become at it. How do you learn to love a man? You might think you learn by obeying. So after your husband has had one too many gulps from a flask of whiskey, you do not say anything when the laughter gets louder, the jokes get bawdier, and he seems less immune to the fawning of vultures dressed to look like peacocks. He tells you go home. You need your rest, and the music might be too loud for the baby, and he rubs your belly and says he will send one of his soldiers with you to keep you safe on your walk there. You do not say anything when the soldier he summons is none other than Tone, the strong young man you first met by a gutter, a man who now wears the brooding countenance of a gathering storm. You do not tell your husband that he should not send you with this particular man if he knows what is good for him. You do not tell him that he should require you to stay by his side. You struggle to keep up with tone through the rickety stalls of galvanized and plywood, from which vendors hawk fried fish and fish cakes and American hot dogs in fat yellow rolls of bread. He pays no mind to your rounded belly, and even less to the glimmer of Chinky's rough set diamond in a gold band that used to be part of a chain Aidan stole. No, Tone walks apace through the narrow alleys and roadways towards Baxter's village and the beach and the house you have recently moved into with your husband, and he hardly looks behind him to make sure you're keeping up. And though you're nearly panting from the effort of staying a few paces behind him, you keep your eyes on your orange booties, marching one in front of the other, being splattered by soft mud and scraped by rough pebbles and rocks and wood. When he takes you through an alley so narrow that a 2-foot stone blocks the path, you have a dilemma. You don't have a choice but to climb over this stone, but you can't, because the miniskirt will not allow your legs to lift that high. And though you had resolved, when he disappeared years before, that you would never again call this boy in such a way that he could think you need him, you start to stumble, and you have to take your eyes off the booties and call this name you cannot forget. Robert, how do you learn to love a man? The rain comes and the heat does not fizzle, and this boy tells you that there's an entrance to the tunnels just close by this path you are on. Do you remember the tunnels? And the warmth leaves your chest and fans up across your face and down. And perhaps love is indeed obedience, because when he asks if you would like to try to run the rest of the way to Aidan's house on the beach or to follow him to that entrance, you tell this boy yes, yes. You would like to follow him to that entrance. You would like to shelter in those tunnels. That's it.
Wow. So we have to listen, we have to get the book to see what happens next. Sherry, this is a very brave novel. And I wanted to ask you a very difficult question. It is obviously it's a manifesto for women almost. How does that side of your work, or has it been? Have you even given it recognition in terms of the almost activist work or role that this work is going to end up playing when enough people have read how the one-armed sister sweeps her house, and we consider the political, the socio-cultural, and all of the implications and the mirror of Barbados that it offers, notwithstanding the fact that it is set in the 80s. A number of the issues are still very much of of our time. So have you paid attention to that side, the activist side, and the impact that this work is going to have and has had based on the reviews that we have heard from,
Well, I have to say that when I started to write it, it wasn't my intention to write a feminist manifesto or a feminist book or to write specifically about certain themes. It was just about being true to the story that I heard in my head and giving that the best treatment possible as far as my abilities as a writer are concerned. But it became clear to me the more I worked on this story, and certainly after I finished the first draft and started working more on the crafting aspect of it, how it demonstrated some of the issues that are central to my concerns as a woman in the Caribbean, and how much it bore those out and demonstrated some of my own perspectives and some of my beliefs as it relates to certain issues. So I think that awareness that it could be looked at in that way came to me a little later. But I'm happy that people have received it well and people see it that way. It really means a lot to me. In a lot of ways, it's not only a story, it is partially a testament to my own experiences, to other women I've known and seen, and just observations that I've made about the society in which we live. So I'm very pleased if people can take away some of those concerns and bear witness to some of the things that women experience through reading this novel.
Oh, thank you very much. It's definitely something that you have given to our children, our daughters and our people. And all I can say is thank you. It's very, very brave. It's very easy to write a novel that is, sexy and, easy and shallow. It's very difficult to write a novel that cuts at something real. So thank you. I feel as though that was a little challenging for you to do, but we appreciate it. And we wish you all the best. We'll be following everything that takes place with your career and the success of this book. Barbados thanks you as well.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming with us. Take care. The next person we're going to, Sherry has to leave, so she's going to just excuse herself. But the next person we're still staying in the 246, is Dr. Small, Lyle Winston Small. He did a PhD in environmental biology at the University of Guelph. And he has had a distinguished career in agricultural research and administration. And he served, of course, as the PS, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, as well as the Chief Agricultural Officer in Barbados. He has worked at numerous international organizations as consultant, whether CARDI, CDB, FAO, and ICA, and so on projects to eradicate crop diseases, and as well as to set up agricultural information databases. It ended up making him travel throughout the Caribbean, of course, Central America, South America, North America, Africa, Europe, and has written many papers, but he's authored one book. And the book is In Search of the Sacred Silk Cotton Tree. And for that book, he researched the biology, the folklore, and the history of our silk cotton tree. And this afternoon, Dr. Small, who is the foremost expert in all things silk cotton, is going to share with us some of his knowledge and a little excerpt of his book. They tell me he's going to be very, very brief. Everybody seems to have to go somewhere. Welcome, Dr. Small.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
How are you doing?
Not too bad, Could be a lot worse.
I know, it's true. Thank you for all of this effort that you have made on our behalf. All this work in agriculture that we can stand on now in the context of COVID and the need to heighten our agricultural pursuits. But you have focused on the silk cotton tree. Why have you focused on the sacred silk cotton tree?
Yeah, it's a long story. Perhaps let me start from the beginning. The journey searching for the silk cotton tree started in West Africa in July 2002, when our family made a tour of Ghana that was organized by Travel House of Barbados. That tour was an excellent introduction to our motherland for most of the people who made the trip. During the tour, While viewing the countryside from the tour bus, we would often see a huge tree on the horizon, dwarfing all others around it, including very tall palm trees or coconut trees. Our knowledgeable tour guide identified the tree for us by its local and its scientific name and gave us some background information on the tree and its position in traditional African religious worship in Guyana. Only one member of our group recognized the tree as a silk cotton tree, and that there was one near to where she used to work in Barbados. We eventually visited the Caicon Forest Reserve and the Aburi Botanic Gardens near Accra, and were able to see the tree up close in all of its magnificence. On returning to Barbados, memories of the tree continued to haunt my consciousness, and I started to look for it wherever I traveled in Barbados and the various other Caribbean countries around. The first ones I found were at the Garrison Savannah, but I nearly missed them as conditioned by the size of the Guyana trees. I was looking for some huge, outstanding trees that would be somewhat bigger than the typical tree here. To my disappointment, the typical Bajan silk cotton tree was fairly mundane in appearance and only faintly resembled its African cousins. I persisted in the search, however, and found some trees that, even though they could not compare with the African trees in height, could almost do so in terms of total biomass in width and so on. The investigation started as an attempt to document the biology of this tree in Barbados, because it soon became apparent that very few people here knew anything at all about the tree. Available literature on it was rudimentary, and the typical Barbados silk cotton tree looked somewhat different to the trees I had seen in Guyana, and indeed appeared to differ in several respects from the descriptions of the silk cotton tree that I found in the literature. As the search continued, my son Kofi, who I think was at school with you, Anna,
Yes, he was, but much older.
Oh, okay. Became fired with the same sort of enthusiasm that I had developed for collecting information on the tree. And he vigorously helped me to search for further examples of silk cotton trees in Barbados. Somewhere along the way, the search progressed into documenting the biology of the tree, to investigating an historical mystery. We discovered that the tree, which is not very common in Barbados, could be fairly consistently found in a number of places of religious significance in Barbados. We started to try to identify the possible reasons why this should be. Was this just a happenstance? Was there some connection between the tree and the religion of the Amerindians who peopled Barbados before slavery? The religion of the imported West African slaves who found the tree here, and the Protestant religion? Was there some true religious significance to the tree? The book attempts to assemble some facts that should allow the reader to form his or her own opinion on the connection between the tree and religion. We also discovered that the silk cotton tree has taken on a kind of invisibility in Barbados over the years. While the folklore of the neighboring islands abound in tales of silk cotton trees as the abode of duppies and other paranormal creatures, books on folklore in Barbados which we consulted made no mention of the silk cotton tree. Similarly, the various histories of Barbados are generally silent on silk cotton trees. The justice tree is a good example of the invisibility of silk cotton trees in Barbados history. The story of Governor Sir Henry William Tufton being executed by order of Henry Hawley around 1630 is well documented. Reasonably well documented also is the claim that he was executed under the justice tree. However, the history generally made no mention of the tradition that the justice tree was a silk cotton tree, which it so happens apparently survived in St. Mary's Churchyard until 1995. I spent many hours doing traditional searches at the Library of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, the Barbados National Trust, the Public Library, the Barbados Archives Library, and the UB Library at Cave Hill for various aspects of the history of Barbados, Barbados's churches, forts, slave laws, Freemasonry, and so on. I also spent a lot of time checking with people like Newlands Greenwich, who had a wide collection of historical documents and found some references there. To make a long story short, Kofi and myself particularly, did a huge amount of work trying to get information that was relatively sparse and putting it together in a document, in a book that could be read by anybody. That's basically what happened.
Yes. So would you say that there's still that reverence, or are there still trees like this in Barbados?
Yeah, there are still quite a few trees, a lot less than there were when we started the investigation, because quite a few have been destroyed to make way for construction of houses and so on. But there's still quite a lot of them around. You can actually see them in gullies, some gullies. There's still the magnificent trees at St. John's Parish Church and at Codrington College. There's still quite a few of them around, but not as many as one would have thought would be there. I don't think we reached the stage when we need to specifically protect the tree. There's still quite a few around, but we may well be approaching that point.
So did you have an excerpt, or was that our excerpt?
I have an excerpt.
That's it. Oh, wonderful.
But do you have the time
I'm peeping at somebody who is, I'm peeping at my producer. Yes, we do. But I just want to tell the others authors, the lineup. I want to come to David Ambrose, then I want to come to Dr. Cox, and I want to come to Adsiko. So we're going to, so I don't want to, so this is a very special moment. So if you have even the tiniest excerpt, we would appreciate it very much. So Dr. David, we are coming to you. I see you. I recognize you. And there's some other people who have joined us. Speaking of people that were at school like 100 years before me with Kofi, I see Dr. Mosley. I want to welcome you, and I want to welcome everybody else who is, they're only 6 years at school, so you know it couldn't be 100 years. But anyway, I like to tease them. So welcome everybody. We're having a good session. These are our authors. Please, Dr. Small, don't deprive us of an excerpt.
Okay, let me just read a part on Barbados. In the Caribbean islands, whose history includes slavery and the importation of slaves from West Africa, The folklore surrounding the silk cotton tree generally revolves around common occult themes, such as Dapis, as well as Doguru or Sukuya or Esema, live in the silk cotton tree during the day and emerge at night to prey on the unwary. To protect oneself against these denizens of the underworld, one has to place lots of sand, grains of sand, or rice or other grain around the house. The Sukuya has to count all the grains before it can get in. And as long as a large enough quantity is offered, daylight catches it counting and it has to leave. In Haiti, Grenada, and Trinidad, the Lougarou is normally said to be an attractive female, except for the fact that she has one good foot and one twisted cow's foot, and therefore wears a long dress to cover her bad foot. The Lougarou leaves her silk cotton tree home each night and waits for an unsuspecting person to entice, or for a small child to steal. She drinks adults' victims' blood, who then wake up to tired and dotish. This chapter examines various aspects of the silk cotton tree in the countries which we visited in the Caribbean and the larger African diaspora. These aspects include interesting items of history, as well as the folklore associated with the tree in that particular country. We start with Barbados. Lake Legon, in his true and exact history of Barbados, does not report any silk cotton trees in Barbados. However, Schomburg, Maycock, Watts, and also Hughes list silk cotton as one of the indigenous species growing here before the European settlement. Most cotton trees were felled in the relatively indiscriminate clearing of land by the settlers between 1627 and 1665. However, it seems likely that following this, specific orders might have been made here for the destruction of silk cotton trees to deprogram slaves from expressing their traditional religion. Indeed, Chester in 1869 stated, in fact, a Barbadian planter hates a tree as a bulldog does red rags. And even though documentary proof of the specific policy for this destruction of silk cotton trees in Barbados has not yet been found, numerous laws and customs were put in place in Barbados to wean slaves from traditional African religious practices, as indicated by Carol Watson, who has written extensively on the creolization of these slaves. It should be recognized. I'll go to I'll do this chapter, is the last excerpt, not chapter, paragraph. It should be recognized that the tree's association with bats to its extensive roots, which could be a nuisance, the discomfiture caused by the dispersal of the floss, and the fact that it had no commercial value to the colonists, and its flowers were not particularly attractive, might also be some of the reasons for cutting down many of these trees. The chapter goes on for quite a few more pages there. I think I will stop at that.
These are such powerful and important books. Thank you very much, Dr. Small.
Thank you very much.
I am going to, well, my daughter's interpretation of the La Jablesse, is that the Ligon you were talking about?
Yeah, the same one.
The Ligon? Okay. She interpreted in terms of the men, the impact of La Jablesse. But thank you very, very much for this important work. And thank you for joining us on Lockdown 246.
Thank you.
And Anne says, please be aware of the man or woman to find near a silk cotton tree. You have to be careful. Thank you. So we want to go to David Ambrose. David, how are you doing?
I am doing fine, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Where are you physically located right now?
I am in Grenada. I'm in St.
In the
George's,
beautiful
Grenada.
island.
Spice
Wonderful.
Island.
Spice Isle.
Yeah.
And you're
Although
not
the,
locked down, right?
no, lockdown 473 took place in March of 2020.
Right.
So we wouldn't be under lockdown anymore.
Oh, wonderful. That's where we should be. So I want to ask, I want to give you a bio first of all. David Ambrose attended Grenada Boys School, secondary school. Should I put the years? Between 1983 and 1988. And after spending a year at the Grenada National College, he traveled to the US to pursue his degree in foreign languages at Prince Pierre College. He graduated from there in 93 and obtained a master's in, Anne says, yes, GBSS to the world, and obtained a master's in education, curriculum, and instruction from the University of Phoenix. He began his teaching career at the GBSS in 1994, oh yes, where he taught mathematics and Spanish. In 1998, he resigned from the public service to to be a part of a founding team that started the Meridian School of Grenada, which was a private all-age school, which is so important. At Meridian, he taught several subjects, including mathematics, Spanish, French, integrated science, English language and literature, and became head of Meridian in 2005. In 2008, he left there to take up a position as communication studies lecturer at the T.A. Mary Shaw Community College. He's chair of the Department of Arts, Humanities, and General Studies there, and he continues to be a communication studies lecturer. So this semester, for example, he's teaching basic Spanish and basic German at the college, and he's an education developer, sports fan, farmer, music enthusiast, and tour guide. Welcome. Welcome. I was going to tell you como estás, but I said, let me be careful. Because we might not be able to carry on the conversation properly. Tell us a bit about the book, which is called White Spice That Times in Bogles and Zone 1.
Right. So I published 3 books. White Spice is my first publication. It's a crime thriller whose story is set in Grenada. And so it follows a fictitious drug squad that investigates the cocaine trafficking across the island and around the island. So there are some scenes at sea as well. So that's White Spice. That time in Bogles that I'll focus on today is set in Carriacou, and my background is actually Carriacou. It's set in our sister island of Carriacou. My mom is originally from Carriacou, and so I decided to write something about the cultural practices of the people of that island, since their culture is closer to the practices of West Africans than the practices that we have on mainland Grenada. So I've said the story in Bogles, which is the village of my mom. Actually, my mom has some Bajan connections too. She was an Ashby. I know there are still some Ashbys in Barbados.
Oh, yeah.
So there's our father came from Barbados, actually. So that's my second book. That's my novella. And then in 2019, I decided to just publish a short story for entertainment purposes that I call Zone 1. Zone 1 is a bus zone. Throughout our state, we have bus zones, and so Zone 1 is the southern bus zone. Grandance, where the beaches are, the hotels, a lot of things happen there. So that's where I've set that story on a Christmas Eve, a busy Christmas Eve day. And so one motor officer has to patrol the traffic zone, and he's in charge. He's trying to regulate everything. So that's Zone 1. But I'm focusing on that time in Bogles today.
Okay, and they're all inspired by Grenada and Grenadian cultural experiences and historic. Okay, So there's none of them is a political one or historic in terms of, okay.
Well, that time in Bogus, I'll classify it as a cultural slash historical piece, cultural slash historical fiction, because the events that I described actually happen in Caracol, but the characters are fictitious.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I wanted to ask you also if you are going. So that's the book that you are going to read.
That's the book I'm going to read from. Yes.
So please give us the excerpt, and then we can ask a few questions after it, if anything.
Great. And it's interesting that Dr. Small spoke about and read about the silk cotton tree. That is something that comes with a lot of, well, that could be scary for a lot of Grenadians. And my story is, the Bogle story is set in 1981 or 82. It follows a young boy, Daniel, who goes to Caracol to spend his Easter break with his relatives, his cousins, Elisha, Elijah, and Ruth, and with his aunt and uncle, his aunt Tanti, and his uncle Tantan. And there's a scene here where they're looking for water. It's dry season, and they had to walk past a silk cotton tree. You know, he hadn't realized it was a silk cotton tree. He was glad for the shade, hot sun. And when he saw the size of the trunk and branches, he realized, oh, silk cotton tree. So without saying a word to each other, all the children started to run past the tree at top speed, you know, because these trees in our culture are just creepy. You know, nobody would want to walk past these trees at night. But I am going to read an excerpt that takes place in the middle of a huge celebration called a stone feast, a tombstone feast. In Caracol, whenever a family member dies, at least 2 years after, the family, all of the relatives will get together to build a tomb. And there's the erection of a tombstone or a headstone. And that brings everybody together in a huge ceremony, a religious ceremony, but there's a feast that goes with that. And that takes place at the family member's home. There's dancing and music, a lot of food. And so I'm going to read an excerpt that takes place here because Tantan's, I think it was his brother who had died some years before. So they're finally erecting the headstone. So this is from the chapter called Stone Feast. And so they've dedicated a few things already. There's a plate of food that goes in the house that must not be touched. That's for the ancestors. The music's playing on a cassette player. You know, the old songs from Kitchener and people like that. We're talking about the late 70s, early 80s. So. And now we get to the traditional music with the string band and so on. So here goes. A string band then took over the entertainment, and the merry atmosphere in the village went up a notch as 2 guitars, a banjo, and a violin called out to every home in Bogles and surrounding communities to dispatch its occupants to the Peters yard. Daniel and Elijah moved closer to the action. Elisha disappeared inside the house. Jack, look, we cousin playing banjo. Daniel pointed out the tall man with the afro. Godwin on a high boy. With eyes closed, Godwin rotated his head swiftly in time with the fast breakaway rhythm that his band strummed. The wind had picked up now, and Masanto and ordinary lanterns around the yard cast eerie dancing shadows in the dusk. Everybody in the yard was transformed into a dancing machine. That is the best banjo man in Caracol, Elijah stated. Listen to that banjo talk now. Several minutes later, drums replaced the stringed instruments and the crowd rearranged itself to form a circle facing inwards. Tantan, Concheryl, and 2 other Bogles elders danced to the center of the ring with bottles. They go in and wet the ground again, Daniel said confidently. Kopai, you're getting to know the thing, Elijah said, grinning. The foursome poured rum and water alternately on the ground, uttering words that Daniel still couldn't understand. He deduced that they were again calling out to the ancestors and spirits. Tanti and them come in and dance now, Elijah announced after the invocations. Tanti and three middle-aged women gamboled bare feet to the center of the yard to the slow beat of the drums. Daniel was surprised to see Elisha among the three drummers. His open palms struck the goatskin surface of his bass drum in perfect sync with the other bass drummer. Ruth and another girl shook shacks energetically to the established rhythm. Long sharply in the bula drum, man, Elijah said to his cousin. Sometimes I just play the kata drum too. He pointed to the largest drum in the middle of the trio. Tanti looked even taller with her green and yellow head wrap. A multicolored winged skirt covered the bottom half of her dress. The floral pattern of the skirt reminded Daniel of the red, pink, and purple bougainvillea flowers around his house in Grenada. All four ladies wore matching costumes. Soon the intensity of the drumming increased. A few ladies standing behind the drummers clapped and chanted as the dancers stepped, skipped, and strutted for a few minutes in the ring. The choreographed dancing and rhythmic drumming hypnotized Daniel until he thought he was in a trance. One singer would throw out a line, then the others in the group would respond in a chorus. Their language was unfamiliar to Daniel. He made a mental note to ask his mothers if Kayaks speak other languages besides English. Then Tanti was left alone to do a solo act. She took up a spot in front of Elisha, who pounded his drum while focusing on his mother's feet. The bass seemed to reach out on its own to move them. "Whoa!" Daniel exclaimed. "That's sick, boy." He nodded in approval, and his eyes bulged as they fixed on his aunt's feet, moving in perfect cadence to her son's drumming. Tanti flared her skirt as she skipped from right foot to left, revealing its shiny red inner fabric. At times, her upper body hung parallel to the ground before she would rock back upright to the boom of the bula. She shimmied and shook her hips and head in quick time to the drumming. A roar went up from the audience as a slim figure twirled 6 times while the drumming rose to a crescendo. She suddenly leapt in the air, then dropped to a crouched position in the center of the circle, her head bowed. The drums fell silent. The spectators erupted in cheers, applause, and whistles. "Kopai, this is the best big drum dancing I ever see," Daniel said, breathing heavily. So that was my short excerpt of the dancing and
Grenada
celebrating.
in the house. How different
Right.
is it between 1984, 81, 81, 82,
182.
when you say, and now, in terms of the geographical, the scenery and so on, the physical layouts? Has it been affected by a whole lot of, like how the silk cotton trees have mostly been cut down and so on? Is it preserved more in Karakou? I mean the overall environment, the overall physical environment.
Yeah, the place is very different now than it was in the 1980s. It's very developed compared to the 80s. A lot of houses now have been converted from board to concrete. If you go to Karakou, for example, as the story is set in Karakou, in the setting of this story, there was hardly any running water into homes. There was hardly electricity. When I visited when one of my family used to visit our relatives back then, it was lamps and gas lamp and kerosene lamp and so on. And you walk to go from one village to another. People still walk, but there are vehicles now. I brought out earlier in the book that people rode donkeys in Carriacou back then in the 80s. The last time I went to Carriacou in 2019, I didn't go in 2020 because of COVID. I hardly saw any donkeys there. It's all about driving around in the latest vehicle. Yeah, so the pace is much more laid back than it is on the mainland. You just go and you stand or sit along the side of the road and chill. I remember bringing my wife there some years ago in 2014. She's from Zimbabwe, and we were hanging out with my cousin, and she was wondering what are we doing now? So we were telling her, we're just relaxing, we were just standing on the side of the road doing nothing, but that in itself was doing something, relaxing and looking at everyone.
Yes, you have a lot of support here. Boom, Mr. Spice. And reminds us that when you cut down a silk cotton tree, that something tragic happens in the village.
Yeah,
and that if a government official participated in cutting down a silk cotton tree, then that was the end of his political career. I hope we can continue to preserve all of these things. I want to thank you, David.
Thank you.
I will
Thank you for
also
having
be
me.
following. Thank you very much for staying with us and
you.
for the 3 contributions that you have made, all of which I'm going to get through my agent, my Grenadian agent, who is Alison Francis.
Oh, Alison, okay.
Where are they? They're available.
We went to primary school together. The books are available on Amazon.
Right,
Bogles is available in Kindle as well.
Good.
White Spice only as paperback, and Zone 1 both as paperback and Kindle.
Okay, I forgot to ask everybody about that, but most people's books are generally, from what I saw in the bios, available on Amazon. And if there's any other information that the authors can put in the chat for us, so that we can not only keep in touch, but to get the books. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tell me, oh yes, and we can, at the end, we can state all of them. Okay, it's deambrose.net. deambrose.net. That's awesome. Thanks, David.
Thank you.
So we are going to go to Dr. Cox. We are going a little bit over time, but we started early. Okay. Yes, I see you. Dr. Cox, I want to say something about everybody. Dr. Cox is Vincentian. So all my roommates all my college roommates were Vincentian, so it's one of my second homes. He is Richard A. Byron Cox, and he's Vincentian, but he has expansive Caribbean roots, just like David. His mother was born in St. Vincent, while his father has deep Grenadian roots. His direct family was merely continuing a tradition which was set by his grandparents in terms of that expanse. He can trace his heritage to at least 5 Caribbean islands. He's a lawyer who specializes in public international law, in which he holds a PhD. He was educated here in the region, in Europe, in Latin America, and is trained in many disciplines such as international relations, diplomacy, and foreign policy. He is also multilingual, and he's presently an international civil servant with the United Nations. Prior to pursuing his university training, he worked at a primary school as a teacher, and he taught in adult education programs. When he came back from university, he served in the ministries of legal affairs and foreign affairs in Vinci-land before moving on to take up his first international appointment. He's been a civil servant, international civil servant, for the last 10 years and works in the area of sustainable development. He has a passion for writing, as we are going to see, which began in his early teens, starting with poetry. He's written a number of major articles for journals and newspapers on various subjects of national, regional, and international significance. He's a regular contributor to Searchlight newspaper in St. Vincent, and his first story, The Christmas Recitation, was aired on radio when he was only 17 years old. Did you remember that? Were Mama's Tears in Vain is his first book, but he says that it's definitely not going to be his last book. Welcome, Dr. Cox.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor, a great pleasure to be here with all of you. I have been listening to everything and following everything. So I'm happy to be here. Just to say one thing though, your bio of me is at least 15 years old. I have been a national civil servant for 25 years of my life. I wouldn't tell you when I was born, so you wouldn't know how old I am. Well, I've written quite a lot more since then. But yes, Mama's Tears is something special, which I hope to share a little bit about today.
And I thought it was so accomplished a bio, so I can't imagine. Tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what I'm missing, please.
Well, actually, I write for law books. I'm a university professor. I teach various universities around the world. I've been a special and all guest lecturer at universities from Oxford to the University of Bonn to Korea to where I've lectured on every continent on this planet as a special guest lecturer or distinguished lecturer. I have over the last, let's say about 10 years, been writing, as I said, for legal journals and for law books. Actually, I've just contributed to a major law book which would come out about environmental law, environmental politics, and the practices regards third world countries, where I wrote specifically about the SIDS and their battle in contemporary international relations and how we as Caribbean people deal with that. As you can appreciate, we are really and truly very vulnerable, and a careful look at the stats which show that the Caribbean is probably the most affected region in the world as regards climate change. There's no ifs and buts about that. If you were to look at, for example, just the storms over the last, say, 15 years, they have been more intense, they have been more deadly, right? And they have cost us a lot more. And the point is that as a group of small states, we do not have the political power. We do not have the scientific expertise and things like that to deal with this thing, you know? So the question is for the Caribbean, how do you confront a world which is causing you so much harm? Because our contribution to climate change is very small, minuscule, but we suffer most. So how do you deal with that? The question is, how do the Caribbean, the post colonial Caribbean, how do we come with a new mindset, which is basing our history of slavery, of suffering, of poverty, and so on, right? That makes us survive in this contemporary world. As Stalin once said, what should be the ambition of the Caribbean man? That is a question it is not a philosophical question. It's not a conceptual argument. It is an existential question that must be answered. So we have a lot of things ahead of us. How we do that, how we prepare ourselves to handle that is a serious, serious question, you know? And I don't think, I mean, we have a very good university. As you know, our university is now among the four top % in the world. So it tells us that we're going somewhere. But is academic training alone going to help us? What more do we need to do? How does the Caribbean bring itself together to confront a world which, as we see now, for example, let's just take the contemporary question, the pandemic. The Caribbean is going to suffer and suffer and suffer because tourism, Barbados is a place of tourism, St. Vincent is a place of tourism, Bahamas, and so on and so forth. So we really do have a serious problem in our hands. And how do we deal with all of that? What kind of mentality do we create in the new Caribbean man, a post-historical man whose consciousness must be based in his history to take him forward.
Mhm.
It's a serious thing. Enough about that. We're not here to talk politics.
But we appreciate it because it's really the agenda of our Caribbean politicians, you know, to point out that we are, I can't remember the terminology that is used, but that we are the most affected, but we create it the least, you
Yes.
know? So
Thank you.
in fact, it's actually the only area where we are eligible to get grant financing now, anything to do with climate change, because everybody's graduated and, you know, it's difficult, not everybody, but Barbados in particular, it's difficult to get, you know, your financing done unless there's something, because that's the only thing that is recognized now as being, you know, so important, but or so critical and desperate. So, but I wanted to hear about your books. So I only have one book here, but you're telling me there have been several books. Which book are you going to share with us tonight?
Well, actually, the book I'm going to share is this one, Where Mama Stays in Vain. It is the only book that I've actually published, but I've published
Okay.
on my own. But a lot of my work has been published, in particular in law, with other professors. But this is the only book I've published standing on my own. Okay? And this one is different from all the others. All the others do with politics and law and environmental politics and things like that. This is something different. This is about the history of psychology, the history of sociology, the history of economics of our people, and how did we move over the last 100 years from being a colonized people, a people dehumanized, stigmatized, barbarized by slavery and colonialism, to create a Caribbean man, a man who created Steel Band, a man who created Garfield Sobers and Viv Richards, you know, and a man who created Dr. Eric Williams. How do we do that? How does a people who has been until 1838, you know, were treated like animals, right? Within one generation, sends to the world two Nobel Prize winners in the persons of V.S. Naipaul and the St. Lucian
It's three.
Derek
It's
Walker.
Derek Walker and it's
And
Arthur
before
Lewis.
that, we had the economists, you
Right.
know, so Arthur Lewis. How does
Yes.
people do that? How does the people who, with less than 5 million at the time, beat the whole world in cricket, a game which was taught to us by the British? How do you go to India and beat a subcontinent of 600 million people when you have less than 5 million? So you have to understand what sort of people you are, where you come from, and where you have to go based on that history. You see, this is the issue at heart. How do we fashion a people that will take us and build upon all of that? You know, these are questions that we must answer. I mean, any student of literature and any student of history in our Caribbean must read Dr. Eric Williams, From Columbus to Castro, and his seminal work on capitalism and slavery, right? But a lot of people miss something called Inward Hunger, the making of a prime minister. That should be read. A matter of fact, in terms of fashioning the thinking of our people going forward, Inward Hunger might be even more important than capitalism and slavery and From Columbus to Castro. But of course, I mean, we have many of the greats, you know. Celia R. James Beyond the Boundary is a seminal piece of work that needs to be read. You know, right? Olandas Patterson, Children of Sisyphus, and things that we all have to read and understand. We all have to read and understand if we're supposed to fashion a people, a proper people that can confront the challenges that we face today. It's a very serious question. But yeah, we're here to talk about Mama Stays in Vain.
Yes, so tell us about it. Does it capture a lot of the themes that you were just talking about, or is it a?
Mama Stays Within it is an extremely simple work, but yet is the most profound, and it's not my view of this. Everyone who has read it, including Mr. Wall, will tell you that. It's the most profound piece of literature that describes our Caribbean, but inspires our Caribbean. It's a work in which I try to explain to our people where we came from in a literary sense. It's a historical book. The book is full of historical facts, but you would not know that you're reading historical facts. So, for example, Mr. Ambrose is from Grenada, which my father's family comes from. In 1955, there was a hurricane in Grenada called Janet that completely destroyed. It is in this book here, you understand? But I don't give you that as a statistic. I give you it as a story. In 1935, they were right. In the 1930s, they were right all over the Caribbean. And that is why the Morn Commission was established. Again, I tell you all of that in a story, in a literature that makes you laugh, that makes you dance, that makes you cry, that makes you do all sorts of stuff. The book is made up of 5 stories, right? The title story is Where Mama Stays in Vain. It's a heavy story. It's a story that makes you cry. It's a story that you have to read with a towel in your lap, you know. And I'm not telling you this. You can, when you get a copy of the book, you would see for yourself. There have been reviews from around the world. As a matter of fact, when this book came out, all of my colleagues at the United Nations said, "You're wasting your time. You should not be here. You were born to write. You're not born
Are
to..."
you going to give us some? You're teasing us, but you're not giving us any.
I hope you'd allow me, I think I might need about 5 minutes to read something for you. I hope you'd allow me that amount of time.
Oh, that's so long. But can you
But
slash?
I promise you would see why.
Could you slash it?
Yes, let's see what happens. This,
Okay,
I'm going
come.
to read from what is called, it's the second story in the book. It's called When Japhet Met Lucifer. And this is a story about the Caribbean bad boy. And I'm beginning from the beginning of the story. I'll read about a page and a half because you need to get the context. But it's about a boy who represents what I think this Caribbean should represent as well in many ways. So here goes. When Japhet met Lucifer. "Miss Phillips, Miss Phillips." The shouting was coming from about 100 yards down the road. And Lou Phillips knew from the first call that it was the voice of the neighbor, old Jean. With stick in hand, her head wrap barely dragged down, and walking as quickly as her old bones allowed, she persisted, Miss Phillips, oh God, Miss Phillips, that a evil." From the first shout, a mountain rose in Mrs. Phillips' chest. Her heart missed a beat and then began to race. Even though she had heard many of these, "Oh God, Miss Phillips," and quite often for the last 3 years, she had not gotten accustomed to them. The reason being, while she knew what they meant, she could never tell how serious the damage was with each new occurrence. "Oh God, Miss Phillips," continued old Jean, pausing to allow for her heavy breathing. "The boy wicked, he wicked to death." A clearly out of breath and visibly upset old Jean wailed, "Miss Jean, please come in and sit down and tell me what happened," Mrs. Phillips said, opening the little galvanized gate to allow an almost collapsing old Jean to enter. Lou Phillips, who was educated way beyond her time, was a married woman. However, for many people at that time, Mrs. was something one used interchangeably with Miss. The important thing was that you showed respect. "Please sit down, Miss Jean, and tell me what happened," encouraged Lou Phillips. "Can I get you some water?" "It's about the bad one again," said a still heavily breathing old Jean. "Sit down and take your time. I will get some water to drink," said Mrs. Phillips as she went off to the tin bucket with the drinking water. Old Jean proceeded to make her complaint. "And it's just this morning, I hear you beating him. And look what he did." "Miss Phillips," said old Jean, her chest rising and sinking after every 2 words. "You remember I tell you that I was going to the river to wash 2 pieces of clothes and come back? Well, Miss Phillips, when I reached the river, I hear a sound like a cat wailing. I look further up the river, and there was Japheth dragging the cat on a piece of rope, trying to drown the poor cat. Miss Phillips, when I see that, I drop the basin and I scream. The moment he heard the scream, he let go the cat and dig out full speed. And I was so frightened that I forget the basin and the river washed it away. That was the only basin. By this time, Miss Phillips had brought old Jean a big tin cup of water and giving it to her, asked, you know what, you know if the cat is all right? I don't know. For by the time he let it go, it was so frightened that it ran off with the string around its neck. Miss Phillips said more to herself than to old Jean, Lord, I am tired with Japhet. I am tired. That boy is nothing but trouble. Old Jean continued, I know he is your child, and you might not agree with me, but I think that he is possessed. You should take him down to Moses for his own good. I know that Mr. Phillips is a spiritual leader and all that, and it wouldn't look right for you to be seen to be going to obey a man with your son. But Moses is the only one who could help that boy because he know how to drive out evil spirit and thing. And that boy is definitely possessed with some kind of evil spirit. While Miss Phyllis felt that old Jean was out of her place to tell her what she should do about her children, worse still, that she should take her son to an Obeah man, she quietly confessed to herself that she had of late been thinking this might be the solution. Japheth had always been bad from the day he could speak, but for the last 3 years, from the time he turned 10, he had been just impossible. May I just read for another minute?
Finish.
No, I think I just want to get to a little point here, and so just allow me. Mrs. Phillips' troubles with Japheth began even before he was born. Of the 12 children she brought into this world, none caused her to vomit as much early morning sickness as he did. She had quarreled with James, her husband, throughout her pregnancy with Japheth. Many days she could not get out of bed due to just feeling too ill. One night, on the night Japheth was born, the midwife nearly did not come to help her with the delivery due to rain, thunder, and lightning. Mrs. Phillips' sister Pearlie had to plead and beg, and then the midwife only came after she was told that Mrs. Phillips' life was on the track. To cap it all off, the whole boat process took the better part of 6 hours, with Mrs. Phillips losing consciousness twice. From that night and for the last 13 years, Mrs. Phillips has known nothing but trouble with this son. When he was just 7.5 years old, she was summoned to the primary school. His class teacher, Mary Shorty, complained that Japheth had put a piece of broken mirror on the floor under the desk so that he could see the color of the girl's panties, encouraging other boys to join him, thereby, thereby causing an uproar. Mrs. Phillips remembered vividly the expression on teacher Marie's face when the latter declared, I have never seen so much voice in someone so small. This child has no innocence. Mrs. Phillips knew that teacher Marie was saying that, in her opinion, Japheth was nothing but a little devil, and she, teacher Marie, would rather have nothing to do with him. While Mrs. Phillips understood this, it wasn't pleasant news to hear. After all, he was the son of the village pointer. Just one last piece. A year earlier, it was fisherman Buddy Boy who had come rushing with the news that little Jerome Gordon had been saved by him after going to Dark Rock with Japheth to fish. It transpired on the way to school, Japheth met Jerome, his classmate, and somehow convinced him they should go fishing. While seated on the rock waiting for the fish to bite, Japheth started up a conversation with Jerome. So you learn for swim yet? No, but my big brother Bagger go and teach me. You making joke. Big man like you can't swim, replied Japheth. Bagger are the best swimmer in the village. So me go soon learn. I don't have to worry, said confident Jerome. But Japheth had already decided that it was time that Jerome learned to swim. Without warning, he got up and pushed Jerome off the rock, landing him in the water at least 2 meters deep. One moment, Jerome knew he was on the rock talking to Japheth. The next, he found himself in the sea, battling for his life, screaming, help, help, between his sinking and taking in mouthfuls of water. Japheth, in response, sat on the rock, encouraging him to learn to swim by slow clapping and chanting, make it, Jerry, make it. Make it, Jerry, make it. Make it, Jerry, make it. Thank you very much. So
The
now,
little boy is possessed.
right?
This rings like so many stories of our lives, of our childhood. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Cox. I love how you span the heavy legal and political with this, and I hope that that is a fiction. So thank you, all the best, all the way in Germany. Thanks for staying with us with the difference in time zone. I see Adziko is next. I feel as though we have you waiting, but it's because we're leaving some of the fire for the end. And for Yard,
I hope so.
welcome.
Thank you very much. And hello to everyone.
Hello to you. I have a bio. And Adziko Simba Jegele. Gegele. I'm giving you a little Spanish there.
I tell you.
Adziko is a writer, storyteller, spoken word artist, and a workshop facilitator. Her writing covers diverse genres, including prose, poetry, and script writing for theater, video, radio, and television. Her work appears on the American Academy of Poets website and has been anthologized in regional and international collections. So her debut novel, All Over Again, published by Blouse and Skirt Books in Jamaica, won the inaugural 2014 Burt Award for Caribbean Literature in April that year. Since October 2018, Adziko has been conducting writing workshops and clinics for beginners and intermediate writers in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean. In October 2019, Adziko was awarded a Bronze Musgrave Medal by the Institute of Jamaica for her contribution to the island's literature. And another novel, her latest novel, Deep Water, will be published later this year. Welcome. How are you doing? How is it in Jamaica?
Jamaica is a little bit blowy at the moment, but we're doing good. We're doing fine here.
Awesome. Has Deep Water been published?
No, not yet.
It's later 2021.
That's right.
So Dr. Cox, I have a current bio, please, for Adziko. Tell me, which book are you going to share with us today? And
well,
tell me a bit about...
I'm going to read from All Over Again.
All Over Again.
Yeah.
But before you start to read, I wanted to ask you about the inspiration and getting involved. Is it always has writing always been in your DNA, or is it something that you came to?
Well, no, it's always been in my DNA. My mother was a teacher, and she used to de-stress during the summer holidays by taking me to a bookstore, giving me a certain amount of money, and then she wouldn't see me for 6 weeks because I'd be dug deep down into reading. And I only realized that this was a ploy later on in life. But by then I was already hooked on the written word. So I guess it was a good thing.
And we end up benefiting from it.
I hope so.
Are the books all set in Jamaica? Is this book All Over Again, as well as the forthcoming book, are they both set in Jamaica?
Yes, they are.
Oh, wonderful. So tell me which excerpt you're going to read.
Okay, well, the book is a coming of age book about a boy who's 12, and he lives with his mother and father, his sister and his grandfather. And the book covers the year that he is turning 13. And he believes that he should now be given all of the benefits of adulthood. But he still wants to hold on to the benefits of childhood as well. And so it's a very traumatic year for him because he just can't figure out how does he get into being an adult, but yet still have all of the advantages that his little sister has. Yeah, so I'm going to read from towards the end of the book where he and his father have a little standoff. And I think his father starts to understand that perhaps his little boy is not so little after all, not anymore.
Thank you.
You don't understand your father. You can do it. You know you can. You just know it. You can. You have watched him do it a million times. Every time you go out with him, you watch him. And whenever you get a chance to sit close to Mr. Batcher or Mikey or Chalky or Mr. Clinton, any one of them, man, you watch them too. That is how you know. You can do it. Automatic or shift stick, you can do it. You can drive. That is why you can't understand your father. Why every Friday when he turns the pickup into the yard and leaves it at the gate next to the standpipe for you to wash and sweep out, why he always tells you the same thing. No. Why? Why? Just relax yourself and wash the van and remember the wheels. Why? You know gas pedal from brakes from clutch. You know first gear, second gear, and all of that. Indicator, four-way switch, parking light, headlight, rear view, AC, all of that. Just a little drive. That's all. Just a little drive from the standpipe come up to the house. That's all. That is all. You can't hear. Yes, you can hear, but you're hearing what you don't want to hear. You cannot understand why he doesn't understand that 9 days, not 9 months or 9 weeks, in 9 days you will be 13. And 13 is not no ordinary age to be. 13 is 13. It is the start. How is it your father doesn't understand that 13 is the start of everything? Your father needs to understand you are a teenager, almost. You will just have to show him. That's what you think. You sweep out the pickup, you sweep it out, soap it up, and wash it down. Then you sit behind the steering wheel and imagine driving up and down Valley Road with the windows down and the radio blasting. Cool. You think about what it would be like if you were a teenager in a movie about driving. You think about driving all the way to school, down the winding road to Seven Valleys. Radio blasting, Splo and Fletcher in the cab, a ton load of boys in the back calling out to people as you speed past them at 100, 150. Cool. Water is running swish, swish out of the bathroom pipe by the dasheen. Your father is up at the house bathing. You are down by the gate, sitting in the truck, in the driver's seat, with the key in the ignition. Cool. 13. Almost 13, of course that is old enough. You will just have to show him. You turn the key. Rum goes the engine. Cool. You press the gas. Rum, 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 it says. Cool. Because you can drive, you slide down in the seat and stretch out your foot until you can sink the clutch. You push the stick into first gear because you can drive. You ease your foot off the clutch and press the gas with the other foot easy, easy until you hear that sound, that changing over sound. Because you can drive, and because you can drive, you know That sound means the pickup is ready to move. You have to use both hands to let down the handbrake. All at once, the pickup jumps forward. The pickup jumps forward and the steering wheel starts to turn all by itself. And because you are not tall enough to press the clutch and sit up properly on the seat at the same time, you cannot see over the hood. It doesn't matter you realize how much you know how to drive. If you cannot see over the hood, you realize that when you cannot see over the hood, the pickup will go where it feels to go, not where you want it to go. And making the pickup go where you want it to go is what driving is all about, isn't it? Yes, it is. You slam down your foot on the brakes and the pickup balls out, vroom! This is because you have pressed the gas, not the brakes. If you know how to drive, how come you don't know the brakes from the gas? You have slammed down hard on the gas, and now the pickup is bucking like a mad donkey, climbing over the rocks your mother and Mary Janga painted white and circled around the little flowers garden above the gate. You cannot see over the hood, but you can see branches and leaves and bits of sky and clouds rushing past the side window. You grab for the steering wheel, your hand slips, and the wipers say swish, brr, as they tremble across the dry windscreen. You grab again and miss again. Grab, says the horn. One more grab at the wheel and a jump onto the seat. And you are just in time to see Mary Janga and your father with a towel around his waist and a look of horror on his face and his two hands stretched out and shaking as if he's trying to make the tamarind tree standing between you and the house move, out of the way, out of the way.
Sure, you do that to me. Do that. Oh my God, that's what you got. That's mean. That is exciting, and I'm going to definitely be getting the book because I have to find out what happens next.
Okay.
So I want to thank you. Can you tell me, you can tease a little bit about the forthcoming book? Or we have
Okay,
to...
well, the forthcoming book is completely different. The main character in the forthcoming book is not a boy, but a teenage girl. She's 16, and she and 4 of her friends decide to take a boat, steal a boat, and go to an island off Jamaica, and they get shipwrecked. And so it's about what happens while they're stranded on this island, tantalizing in view of Jamaica, but they can't get there. And also the girl has some spiritual and ancestral connection that she's not fully aware of. So all of these things start to play out on the island.
Thank you very much. This is us, this is our story, and both of them are coming of age stories.
Yes, I suppose the other one is an older coming of age story.
Yes, wonderful. Yes. I want to thank you very much because they touch me, and we look forward to circling back with you maybe when later on this year when the other book is out.
Deep Water, yes.
Deep Water, which is okay. Thank you very much, Adziko.
Thank you too.
The last item is Dr. Amina Blackwood Meeks. So we're staying in yard, and you don't need one, but I am going to give a bio as I did with everybody else. So Amina Blackwood Meeks, who is no stranger to us, is Dr. Nancy, born in Jamaica citizen of the entire region, national of the entire region, and indeed of the world. She's a writer, she's a director, she's a performer, and she's a custodian of the oral tradition. She's a lecturer, she's a researcher, she's a farmer, she's a grandmother. She's widely acknowledged for her instrumental contribution to the recent renaissance of the art form of traditional Caribbean storytelling. She's a teller of both traditional and contemporary tales, and her rich, deep, dramatic, and deliberate voice brings stories from the heads of the ancestors, connecting ancient wit and wisdom with modern needs and modern times. She is confidently bilingual in English and Jamaican. She's the founder of Entekuma, the Storytelling Foundation of Jamaica. She's the founder and artistic director of Little Story Fest, which, as you know, is an annual storytelling festival for children since 2002. She's also a workshop facilitator. As we speak, she is conducting a workshop on storytelling, but it's too late for you to join. You have to wait till summer. She's a motivational speaker, a lecturer in Caribbean history and aesthetics, and she's a Kinteet and Hard Bun podcaster. So welcome, Dr. Meeks. We kept you long.
Thank you, Ayana. Thank you.
How are you
Greetings,
doing?
everyone.
Greetings.
I'm fine. I'm fine. We're over here at Tech Kinteet Kiba Heartburn.
Good. Welcome again. Well, we have a lot of experience with you, but I wanted to know about the book that you are going to feature today in the Love Our Authors Day.
Okay, so I'm going to be reading from my children's book, That's a Good Idea, which is currently available on Amazon.
Okay.
That's a Good Idea is an intergenerational bonding story. The story takes place between a young boy, he don't have any age, maybe about 8, a young boy and his grandfather. And essentially, this little boy sits around watching animals, and he wishes that they could talk and what great conversations they would have. And one of the questions he would ask them is where they came from. So it's a creation tale. So he asked his grandfather if he, the grandfather, knows where animals come from. And the grandfather sits in his rocking chair with his great big enamel mug of Jamaican coffee. So that's me inserting myself into the story. And sips and tells him where he thinks the animals came from and the role of Great Spirit in creating the animals. But as the story unfolds, Great Spirit has created an animal that looks just like this child. And it's a great idea, because each time Great Spirit creates something, he says, that's a good idea. And that's it. The book came out last year, I think appropriately in the period of Black Lives Matters. We say that our children don't understand enough that they matter, but how much have we told them that they matter? The book is also beautifully illustrated, and that's very important to me. We say our children don't read. We say Black people don't read. That's a lie, of course. The first thing that was sold in the world was sold at Axum, and it was a book that Black people write. So if we write in book, how come we don't read? And of course, recently they uncovered so many of the temples in Timbuktu, and are, as we speak, restoring the scrolls that we wrote. I think part of the challenge is that we are not beautiful in books. We're physically ugly, and we don't do beautiful things. So in books, we are not entrepreneurs. We go to the market to buy, so we are not farmers. We don't see ourselves giving. We see ourselves as recipients. I'm laughing because I saw a gorgeous little boy, an American boy, on Facebook recently, which just came back to my mind as typifying what I'm saying. And he had this math problem. He can't be more than 6, I'm guessing. He had this math problem to do, and it was, Johnny has 1 penny, 2 cents, and something else. How much money does Johnny have? And instead of trying to do the addition, which I think the exercise intended for him to do, this little child breaks out in the most contemptuous laughter. He says, Johnny broke. And so part of the ugliness that we see in books is that we're also poor. So it's very important, I think, when we write for children, when we write for ourselves, let us not be poor. Dr. Cox spoke about the fact that we don't know sufficiently, or we don't understand, or we haven't interrogated why it is that having suffered so many years of slavery, we're so great. Because so many years of slavery was but an interruption on my greatness. And my greatness is in my DNA, no matter how many terrible things have been done to me. I know that I created pyramids and maths and counting and the system of dividing the day into seconds and so on and so on and so forth. Even today, Valentine's Day, I have seen so many contentious arguments about why are we celebrating a white man something. And we're the same people who say before history, there was Black history. It's them take with things and mash up. And so we're reclaiming it. But also there are 3 Saint Valentines for whom Valentine's Day is probably named. 2 of them were Black people. One was a Black leader in Rome because we built that place. And the other one was a Black priest from South Africa. And they all lived round about the same, and these beautiful stories about who we are, we lose it in that really terrible moment of the interruption. And it's an interruption we should acknowledge and that we should heal from. But if I fall down and I broke my foot today, I never always have a broke foot. Me did used to walk on 2 foot. And that's part of who I am. And so we wanted to make Johnny, the whole book, beautifully illustrated. And we wanted Johnny to acknowledge that he's beautiful and that he's a great idea. And we wanted the book to be able to appeal to all our children around the Caribbean. So where possible, I have inserted names of Caribbean rivers or Caribbean animals. And the book is going to have, which is now at the publishers, the book is going to have an activity book that asks the children questions based on the story, but where the answers could come from any place in the Caribbean.
Wow. But the book is available, but the activity book is coming out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We didn't want the best to be the enemy of the good. And so we released the book ahead of the activity book, and the activity book should be here shortly.
So is the book inspired by any real character? Because we have been following your...
I have noticed, and I noticed it only recently, that wherever men appear in my stories, them name Johnny. And that's my father.
Oh.
And that's my father. My father's name is Jonathan, was Jonathan Samuel Blackwood. And that can be and we used to call him Mr. Johnny. And that can be the only reason. If the man little, him name Johnny. If the man middle age, him name Johnny, unless him name Grandpa. And if him big, and I have a story with a rude little boy who loved to use him slingshot, and him name Johnny. I was very close to my father. And every so often I have to acknowledge how my father just jumps out at me.
Wonderful. We honor him now too. And
Yes.
thank him for the inspiration that gives us everything that you have given us. So how much of the book are we going to get? Are you going to tease us?
I don't know how much time we have, so I will read from the beginning, some of the beginning, and I will read the end, which I shouldn't do because it gives it away. But the end is so beautiful that I want to share it, especially for that great interviewer that we had earlier in the program, and for all the children that she represents for Amma. So may I go ahead and read now?
Yes, thank you.
Right. So Johnny is looking out his window and he's wondering where all of these animals came from and if they could talk. And so he goes to his grandfather, who is sitting on the veranda sipping his coffee. I just have to show you. I just think that grandfather is so beautiful. Can you see Grandpa how beautiful he is with him coffee mug? Right.
Yes. And his white hair.
Yes. And he says, Grandpa, where do animals come from? And Grandpa said, it all started with Great Spirit. Before a long time ago, Great Spirit decided to make mountains. He made high mountains and low mountains, brown mountains, red mountains, black mountains, green mountains, but there was only one, Blue Mountain. And down the side of Blue Mountain, Great Spirit decided to put some rivers. Slow River, Swift River, Black River, White River, Mango River, Cane River. Cane River was Great Spirit's favorite because of the plan that one day it would be a wonderful place for Bob to wash his dreads and cook. However, before Bob came to enjoy Cane River, Great Spirit would sit on its banks every day thinking of other things to create, like Maga Dog, Stray Cat, Rat Bat, Cicero Chatty Mouth Parrot, Goat, Sensi Fowl, Crapaw, Screech Owl, Cow, Alligator, Green Monkey, and Mongoose. The mention of mongoose made Johnny laugh. I know mongoose, he said. That's the animal that chases rats out of the cane fields. And to prove how much he knew about mongoose, Johnny broke out into song. Mongoose go in a bedwet kitchen, take out one of him righteous chicken, put it in him waistcoat pocket, sly mongoose. And so Great Spirit decided to allow Mongoose to make one last animal so he could have a friend just to keep him company. And Mongoose said, that's a good idea. According to Grandpa, Great Spirit said to Mongoose, tell you what, take this piece of modeling clay and make me a model of what the last animal on earth should look like. I think I should have a rest. So Mongoose goes off with his piece of modeling clay, and every animal he meets wants to know what he's doing. And when he tells them that he's going to make the last animal on earth, that animal has a reason why it should be them. And each time the animal has a reason, Mongoose gives them a piece of the clay and says, that's a good idea. So when he met the worm said, no other animal can wriggle like me, and to prove it, he strutted his stuff. He did 1 wriggle of a belly, 2 wriggles of a quickie, and 1 for brata, 4 wriggles of a dinky mini. So there, he said, the last animal on earth should look like me. And Mongoose said, that's a good idea. Of course, the lion said that he had the best hairstyle in the forest, except maybe for Bob Marley. So he got a little piece of the modeling clay, and that's a good idea. And the donkey said he could sing, and so on, and he did a song. And Mole said his fingers were the most delicate and sensitive, designed to give everyone the gentlest touch in these times. And Eagle said she had the most beautiful eyes for the look of kindness. And every time an animal gave a reason, Mongoose would say, that's a good idea. Well, as you might imagine, Great Spirit is waiting and waiting and waiting, and him can't see Mongoose a come. So him scream, Mongoose! Yes, Great Spirit, yes. Where is the model of the last animal on earth? And Great Spirit tells him that all the animals gave him this really good idea of why the last animal should look like him. And before he knew what he was saying, he said, with all these models, Great Spirit, one day you and I can launch a special line of garments and have the greatest fashion show in the world. We could discover the next supermodel. Oh, I can see it now. Paparazzi, lights, camera, action. Tourists would come from everywhere. Oh, Great Spirit, how about a beauty contest? We could dress up all the animals in the most outrageous outfits and ask them some very difficult test questions. Now, how would we decide who would be the winner? We could play mirror, mirror on the wall. Great Spirit cut him off right there. Mongoose! That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. So Great Mongoose now is so embarrassed and ashamed. He runs around and he's picking up all the models that the animals had put out to dry, but it had been raining. And he rubbed them all into one piece and put them in a cave to dry. And when it was dry, he came out and he said, see it here, Great Spirit. See it there now. See it there. What you think? This is the model of the last animal on earth. And Great Spirit looked at the beautiful eyes of that model, the rich, deep, dark complexion, the perfect teeth. Great Spirit loved the hairstyle. Oh, it could wriggle and it could sing. Great Spirit looked at the animal some more. All the while, poor Mongoose was busy rubbing his paws, waiting for Great Spirit to make a decision. When he could no longer hold back his excitement, he said, so how is it, Great Spirit? What you think? And Great Spirit looked at that animal. And Grandpa surprised Johnny with the answer that Great Spirit gave. He said, Great Spirit said, lad, black people pretty sir, up ye mighty race, make me clap myself. And Mongoose said, that's a good idea.
A good idea. Thank you. I love it so much. Dr. Meeks, you are just something else. We are so grateful. I feel like that thing just came alive. And Anne is pointing out that the Honorable Marcus Garvey.
Yes. That's and the activity book will ask the children to complete the quote.
Yes.
Up here,
and I saw.
Race. Yes.
I hear some of my favorite artists. We honored Bob Marley. I see Bob was washing his locks.
Yes.
And I heard about the MAGA dog. Peter Tosh. Well, I think about Peter Tosh when I hear that. But I just want to thank you so much. I don't know. There are not enough thanks. There are not enough thanks. I wonder if you could tell us, I'm so afraid, will we ever have another Dr. Amina Blackwood Meeks? And I know that you are doing the courses and carrying on the tradition in every way that you can, but for the little ones, the little Amas and the little, all of the Kaises and all of the little ones that take storytelling and their heritage and so on seriously, what do you say to keep them just focused,
There is, but she went on to be with the ancestors maybe 10 years ago, a wonderful musicologist called Olive Lewin, who has documented a great deal of the oral history in song. And each time she would collect a song from someone, she would ask them the story. How did you come to know this song? And Dr. Lewin told me one day that she went up into the parish of St. Mary, my parish, and she was collecting a particular song from this Rasta man with his wife and children in the yard. And she said the Rasta man was a painter and he had all of these canvases filled with beautiful pictures. But his wife was clearly the breadwinner. And she, Olive Lewin, take her out of herself and said to the man, maybe you should ease up on the painting and give your wife a hand with planting the food and looking after the family. And she said, this man looked at her as if she was the most naive person in the world. And he began to ask her only yes and no questions. There could be no other answer. Him said, Miss Olive, and we all called her Miss Olive. Miss Olive, I think God is a good man. You think so too? She have to say yes. Miss Olive, I think every time God create a pair of hands, him know exactly what him want the pair of hands to do. You think so too? She have to say yes. Miss Olive, you know I believe that if the pair of hands that God create to do one thing, don't do it. Even God himself can't make another pair of hands to do that. You think so too? She have to say yes. You're the punchline. Miss Olive, God send you to collect folk songs? Yes. God send me for paint. And I love that story.
Yeah.
I repeat it all the time when she was alive. And I repeat because I think she entrusted me with it. And I repeat it now when she's not around. What is the point? The point is that there are going to be a million storytellers, but only you, in your unique way, through the unique experiences that you have been entrusted with, will tell a story like you can tell the story. We honor each other, and we are happy that I am a part of you, Ayana, and I'm a part of David, and I'm a part of Anne, and we're all bits and pieces of each other. But your uniqueness, if we could only believe that we are you. I often say, I know how to start a civil war in Jamaica. We love rice and peas on Sunday, and we have 14 parishes, and I'm going to have a rice and peas competition, and I'm going to take one person from each parish, and I'm going to say, cook rice and peas. There is one person who I will not like. There are some Jamaicans who, when they cook the rice and peas, somehow the Scotch bonnet pepper end up dead center of the pot. That's obia. I don't know how them do it. And then there are those Jamaicans who tell you, you must make the peas float before you put in the rice. But we all enjoy rice and peas. It is uniquely our Sunday dinner. Amma, Kais, you are uniquely you. Fling with the formula. Yes, we have a formula because we learn it, but head come before book. And before somebody said there was a formula, there was a head that was just writing. And that's what it means to be creative. Go inside your uniqueness. You know the formula? Dash it away and shine so we can see you. So we can say, wow, there will never be another Amma Small, and there will never be. And then another thing I like to say is, when there is one star in the sky, nobody looks up. One star. You know, when we all get crickneck, when there are so many stars in the sky, and we have to be saying, which is Orion? And the one with the belt and the buckle, which is that one? And Big Dipper, you gather I'm a star watcher, right? And Big Dipper and Little Dipper and all of that. And they're all beautiful. And them all named stars, but they are all unique. So I am blessed to be able to share and teach, but I want to enjoy the diversity of our individual creativity.
Yes, and we are blessed as well. Dr. Meeks, thank you very much. I really appreciate, and we are going to be looking for copies of the activity book to go with. That's a good idea.
Yes.
So good. So tonight we have had a very, very diverse and full program. We have had fiction, we have had pseudo fiction, we've had children's books, we've had history, we have had politics, we have had law, and the list goes on. I want to thank everybody that has appeared with us, has stayed with us. Just heard from Dr. Amina Blackwood Meeks, and her book is called That's a Good Idea, and an activity book is forthcoming. We heard from Adziko Simba, and her book is All Over Again, and her book, which is forthcoming at the end of this year, is called Deep Water, and it's going to be published this year. We heard from Dr. Richard A. Byron Cox, who gave us Were Mama's Tears in Vain, and that little boy. We heard from David Ambrose, who told us about that time in Bogles, based in Carriacou. Dr. Lyle Winston Small, with assistance from his son Kofi, has given us In Search of the Sacred Silk Cotton Tree. Sherry Jones has given us How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. Dr. Editha Nancy Ferguson Jacobs gave us Full Steam Ahead, Locating the Barbados Landship. Lisa Levy, and totally endorsed by Amma Small, gave us Journey Up the Wire Bend, Up the River Where the Story Ends. And of course, we had a powerful interview of Lisa by Amma Small, who is a forthcoming writer, as she said. We want to thank all of those writers. We also want to thank our poet, Yvonne Weeks, and we want to thank Adrian Green, who we had at the very, very beginning of the program. We want to thank our everything, our producer, our visionary, our standard bearer, our every single thing, Anne Worm. We want to thank Rampoon Radio for carrying our program live on Rampoon Radio. Please keep track of their exciting activities online. And we want to thank, that's it. But tomorrow, which is day 13, this is the penultimate day, there's going to be a lip sync, a continuation of the lip sync competition. And then the final day, the grand finale, is learn a different language. So you can come to learn different languages. Can you imagine? We want to finally thank all of you, the viewers, people who are on YouTube, on Caribbean Freedom Fighters, on Rampoon Radio, who are on on Facebook and on YouTube. We want to thank you for being with us. I forgot one person. I want to thank my artist, my daughter, Ya Marshall, who has loaned me her Laja Bless. She said, Mommy, in honor of Valentine's Day. So thank you very much for being with us. It was long today, but it could not have been any other way. We could not have shortened it, and it's a good thing we started earlier. So thank you. Join us tomorrow. We go back to the normal time at 8. And yes, she said Laja Bless because Laja Bless has made the man at the bus stop fall in love. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him. So she said it was perfect for Valentine's Day. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the live. Thank you for the persons who joined us on Zoom, Dr. Mosley, and some of the other regulars. If I don't call you, you know it's still love. So good afternoon, good night. Have a wonderful week. Tomorrow is Monday. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Can I just big up the MC, Anne? Would you allow me?
1 second. Let us just thank Ayana.
Yes.
Ayana for an amazing job for carrying us through. You know, so we really want to say thanks. We're no longer live on YouTube. So this is the after party for those of you who can stay on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, yeah. Dr. Meeks is all yours.